Welcome back to the Encore Audio's YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. You know, I have found a spindle full of sandy beach. It says Sandy B on it, but it is Sandy Beach. He passed some time ago. You can look down in the description. It gives a description of how and when he passed. He was at a step study, in his daily morning step study meeting, and reading the first step, and what a way to go. Anyways, I found a bunch of workshops and individual talks, the Brentwood meeting. It's my full collection. I hope you enjoy this talk. Have a good day if you want to. I really hope you do.
Here, I think there's one or two stragglers, but we don't have any evidence that it could be just 10 more minutes. It could be much later than that. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I want to start out by telling you what an honor it is to have you all here. It has been a dream of mine to do something like this for a number of years. And I'm so glad that to have this collection of guys here for the weekend. We've had one of these before in December. And I think the highlight of it was that the people who attended got to talk to each other and found out there was so much sobriety and so much variety as they started getting to know each other. They didn't want to go home, nor did they want to come back into the classroom for the lectures, because it was just wonderful to have the collection that shows up for something like this. And so I can't tell you how happy I am. And Dave and Martin and Chris, who I think you've met when you were checking in, and Guy King, who is coming, and Amy, who does all of our executive work, and without her we wouldn't get this thing together. When I had this idea, I thought, hey, get a little place, have a few people come. I didn't know you had to form a nonprofit corporation and you had to put half the money up ahead of time and all that kind of stuff. So it took a lot of help to get this thing going. And I got a few announcements to get out of the way. Number one is we're asking everybody to leave your cell phone in the room. We have a cell phone destroyer. If one goes off in here and we just get a sledgehammer and poof, because it really is a statement to yourself that you are putting something ahead of everything. And that's one of the main reasons, is to just do that. I know I was at the Masters and they don't allow them on the course. And I was thinking of all the big shots that go there, you know, the head of IBM and all that, and they go all day without their cell phone, which is amazing. Anyway, the Daysprings requests that after 11 at night that we keep it down to quiet conversations so that the rest of the people can go to bed at 11 if they so would like to. There's juice, coffee, cappuccino, all these things here and in the lounge that is right next to the dining room. And if you haven't been over there, it's not very far away, is the place that we eat. And there's a lounge right next to it with a computer and TV, and there's coffee and juice, and they stock it all the time. They take wonderful care of us here at Day Springs. We just love it. I have a library of books that I put together, and there's 3 or 4 copies of all these books in the back, where Lee has his tape collection. And those books are there on the honor system. Just go back, browse around, see if you find one that you like. Take it back to your room, read it, see if that author grabs you. And if it does, then write the name down, and that's your new guide to take you into an area that you may not have thought about in a while. And I've read all these authors, and I find them as spiritual guides to be very, very good. But none of them speak to everybody, and so that's why we have the selection. And again, it's the honor system, so we need you to put them back when you go home. We also have T-shirts in the back, and we ask everybody to buy a T-shirt because otherwise we lose money. That's our profit center. are the T-shirts in the back, and they're beautiful T-shirts. I think Chris designed them, and you'll really like them. And then the Stations of the Cross, it's a beautiful walk, and they're very simple little crosses with no writing on them. And they allowed us to put one line of the prayer of St. Francis at each station so that we can go and think about what great message is in that prayer. And it's absolutely beautiful along the river, and just go and sit and then move on to the next one. I think you'll find it very relaxing and centering. I think that's all. And Chris, did you want to? Oh, he went out. Oh, there you are. Are all the rooms okay? Are everybody reasonably comfortable with your room? Okay.
You're not going to see me.
Yeah, if not, see Chris. And I think that's it. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is symbolic more than anything, and it's to get us off to a good start. We made a policy of no cell phones in here, but we have brought in here a lot of other things that are keeping us from being centered on the weekend. And what I'm talking about are worries, concerns, the business, the family, whatever it is. And what we're going to do is to just temporarily, whatever you have on your mind that you're working on, we're going to get up, go out of the room, and just turn it over to your higher power. It's just a symbolic thing. And see if when you come back in, you don't feel lighter than you feel now. I've got about 3 things. I had a list. Oh, yeah, here's a few of them that came up last time. There was actually some people that were worried about their own health. There was 2 people last time that were angry at the government. I don't know why they would be worried about that. There was 6 people worried about financial problems. Can you imagine that with the level of sobriety that we have? There was actually people worried about that. 1 person, this was one that we didn't anticipate, feared that the rental car would be broken into. Now that's fear that things would go out of control without a cell phone, all right? And then there's one guy that's worried that no one will enjoy the Far Corners weekend. I'm not quite sure who that is. But we're going to just walk outside, just go out the back door, out the front door, just hand whatever you've been obsessing about to your higher power and just walk back in. And then when we sit down, you're going to see how much lighter it is in here. Take 2 minutes, out the door and back in. I'm floating up here, so I hope you were able to accomplish the same thing. I will mention that we go to dinner after this, and the meals are yeah, Chris?
You just mentioned where the restrooms are.
Oh, yeah. The restrooms are out that door, go down the side of the building, and they're attached to the building, out the back door and down. And when we go in the meal place, there'll be signs, Far Corners on the tables that we're to use. There are other people here. And we eat on the scheduled time, and it's on your thing. It's 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, and 1 o'clock for lunch. Also, the next exercise after dinner is called the forgiveness exercise, and everybody got a letter where it asked you to jot down on a piece of paper any of the burdens that you're carrying around, whether they're resentments, fears, just on one little piece of paper, just like one word of those. And if you would bring that with you, or you can write it out during this lecture, just to have it so that we can go through a process in the second lecture. So now I want to get started. First of all, you'll notice that this is a spiritual weekend rather than a fellowship weekend, even though everybody's in the fellowship. By doing that, it allows us to have outside literature and to talk more freely and expansively rather than staying with just our literature. And I've adopted that because that's recommended in the 11th step in both the Big Book and the 12 and 12. Our libraries are full of books. Prayer and meditation's an individual adventure. It has no limits. And we should be out seeking beyond and talk to your rabbis, ministers. Those are quotes out of both the books. And so that's really what I had in mind on this weekend, was to talk maybe more expansively about the purpose of our program. But in order to do that, I wanted to start out with just the basics, only maybe a frame of reference that's a little bit different than we've heard. But I'm just going to go through the basic principles of our program leading up to the departure point for the weekend. And where I sit in life right now, as I look back on my own life, I realize that if I took the perspective that I am a spiritual entity having a human experience rather than a human entity having a spiritual experience, just taking that frame of reference, that I am a spiritual entity having a human experience, it's been my observation that this is very apparent at both ends of the spectrum of life: a baby and someone dying. When I look at a baby, I see the spiritual entity looking out. What is this? And you see that wonder, and all it is doing is taking in this trip that it's been sent on, which is to be alive on planet Earth as a human being. And you see just the wonder in the eyes as it's taking it all in. There's no judgment yet, there's no identity yet, and it keeps that up for quite a while, just enjoying things. And I think there's a turning point. I don't know exactly what age it is. I had 6 kids, but it's so long ago I can't remember. But there was a time when you'd be at the crib and you could show a teddy bear, and the baby would, oh, and then you could take the teddy bear away and put a doll, and then you could take that away and put a rattle, and there was this wow, wow, wow. And then one day, you went to take the teddy bear away, and it said, mine.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
That is the birth of the ego. We are now having a new identity called me. And this is what evolves. Now you can see the transformation from the spiritual being having a human experience to the human part taking over. Now the human ego is a hard thing to talk about, but that's what we're going to try and do this weekend. So I'm going to use the analogy for our discussion purposes of a modem. And the ego is the modem between the spiritual essence and being a human. It can translate, it serves that middle function of allowing the communication and the experience to be translated back in and to allow this human being to function here on planet Earth. But I'm no computer expert, but people tell me that they're now programming modems to do more than be the middleman, and to start having software and start doing functions and start doing all kinds of things. And that was not the purpose. And it was never the purpose of the ego to take over and become the main event and allow the spiritual to virtually fade into the background. And that's what I think happens, that we assemble, Bill writes, old ideas availed us nothing. We assembled a story. And that story was the story of our lives. And it was put together by this modem. In other words, the purpose was to just simply be here and experience whatever was going to happen. You are in third grade. That's the experience that we're going to have. And the modem decided that third grade was terrible, and that I had a terrible experience in third grade. You see, we have an experience, but experiences aren't terrible. They aren't anything. They're just experiences until I editorialize on them in my own life. And I classify it as terrifying. The person next to me thought it was fine. I had that experience in church with my sister sitting next to me. She thought the Catholic Church was the happiest, friendliest place in the world. Just loved it. Thought the nuns were cute, thought the Latin was cute, the incest, oh, isn't this cute? Still feels that way. I thought it was like Auschwitz. Now, it wasn't either one. It just was. My story was that it was very terrifying. They were after me. They told me about a God that's going to kill me. I looked at the crucifix, and crucifix spoke to me and said, "Little boy, do you see this?" I said, "Yes." And it said, "Well, this is what God did to his only son that he loved. Guess what he's going to do to you?" That was not said by anyone. That was not a fact. That was my story. And so I put together, and we all put together, we didn't know any of this is going on. Nobody realizes. There's the collective ego, and then there's our own ego. And it's an entire fabrication from a spiritual point of view. The problem is it gets so entrenched that it's hard to even make a dent in it. And it's not until we get forced into a program like Alcoholics Anonymous, which with a rough sponsor pries away some of our ideas and makes us let go of them. You remember how hard it was to change your mind the first time? Sounded like a crowbar was inside of my head. That idea's wrong. Would you let go? No, it's mine. I'm not gonna. Finally, okay. Maybe you are right. No, you're wrong. I know, it's the same thing. Well, let me hear you say it. Okay, I'm wrong. Remember how that almost killed us to be wrong the first time? So we started through our lives doing the best that we could, having no clue that we had become our ego. We were aware all the time that something was missing. Remember that empty hole? I don't know, no matter how much I get, it still feels like I'm not complete yet. Authors have various ways of explaining it. C.S. Lewis is one of my favorites, and he talks about no matter how well things are, we still sense it's not quite right yet. That is the spiritual emptiness, that is misdiagnosed, because we're watching the expert advisors on television who are telling us, you know that empty feeling, drink this. You know that empty feeling, buy this. And so we are trying to fix a spiritual problem with material solutions. And anybody who reaches middle age suddenly realizes that that game isn't working. That I got the house, I got the boat, and I'm miserable. What's the deal? And so we are lucky enough to crash and burn and be arriving each in our own way into Alcoholics Anonymous and a spiritual way of seeing things. And if you recall, the first thing they made us do was to surrender. I mean, that is a very huge thing for a human being who has been in charge of their own life all their lives, to give up. I know Marines had a hard time with that. You want me to raise a white flag and give up? Yes. And it has to be unconditional. I mean, that was just unheard of, that you were going to give up totally. But where were you going to go? You remember that? It wasn't that we believed it was a good idea. There was just nowhere else to go. That's what the disease did, which in spiritual terms was one of the greatest things that ever happened to us, was to become an alcoholic and force us to start destroying the ego. And that's really what the steps are for, is to go in and dismantle all of the ideas that are blocking us from returning to our true nature. And I know I signed up for being a hospice volunteer because the more I've been reading about the dying, and we're going to talk about that later, the more I'm realizing that there's a lot of answers right there in the letting go of the ego life and watching the spirit just blossom and almost light the room up. And so that caught my attention, and I've just started wondering why that can't be done at a younger age. Why do we have to maintain our death grip on life? Why can't we start letting go of all of it and have that same experience? So anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's what really motivated me to start trying to work on some of this. Anyway, if we look at it in terms of we're a spiritual being having a human experience, when we come into Alcoholics Anonymous, this is the first time that anyone addressed that. You see what I'm saying? They suddenly brought us into spiritual school instead of college and all of the, you know what I'm saying? It was almost like for the first time in our lives, somebody said, anybody curious about life? Would you like to know what the secrets are? And you go, what? Well, let us show you. First of all, you have to quit playing God. Well, who's going to be in charge? Not you. Well, why would that work? Wait and see. You remember it was just filled with paradoxes. What are you talking about? But we had nowhere else to go. And we had sponsors that were twisting the arms. And we went, okay. And this is what happened. We were finally persuaded to reduce ourselves to just one job. This is what job we are given, if we will follow the program. Just evaluate the results. That's your job. We'll tell you what to do. We'll show you the steps. You just stay back there, get the hell out of the way, do whatever is suggested, and then jot down the results and compare them to the results that you were getting. Well, that's not fair. You remember I came in with a freaking nut ward with a wristband on. My results were not good. And my plan for living did not involve praying, meditating, God, nothing. It involved me figuring out and getting things and so on down. And my sponsor said to me, well, let me ask you, how is your plan working? And I was wearing a wristband at the time from Bethesda Nut Ward. And I said, well, temporarily it's not working too good. Well, when did it ever work good? When was it ever really comfortable to be inside of you? I finally got honest. I said, it's been awful ever since I can remember. It's terrible in here. I just pretend that it's all right, because I don't want to be the only one who's terrible inside. So I go, fine, fine, fine. Turns out everybody's got something like this going on, but we don't have a clue what it is. Some of us go to shrinks. We end up knowing exactly what the problem is, but it's still there. So you just walk around with educated anxiety. But it's still there. You found it. Bill writes that in, I forget where it is, 12 and 12. They'll recognize they're still there. The character defects, they won't go away. And so we are being led through the steps of a process of returning to spirituality by getting rid of what we assembled of ideas. In other words, our old ideas have to go. And as we go back and just strip them away, if it is done completely, we will be back to just a spiritual being having a human experience where you just can look at the wonder of the world, and that's the end of your job. Now the ego hears that and goes, now wait a minute, I've got a lot of things that have to be done. I got to improve the planet. I've got to straighten this out, straighten that out. All you're supposed to do is to enjoy the journey with no editorializing or anything. Now that seems almost impossible, but that's what our program is leading us. What do you think letting go and letting God really means? See, I gave it a certain amount of lip service, but there's a lot of things that I have to keep doing. You follow what I'm saying? You just can't let go of everything. And the question is, why? Well, probably won't turn out right. Well, how do you know? Did you let go of your drinking and it turned out? Yes. Why are you still holding on to this? Because I don't want to kill my ego. I don't want the star to be gone. I won't be, what does Bill write in the 12 and 12, third step? If I turn everything over, I will be, anybody remember? The hole in the donut. You remember that one? I'll be a non-entity. Imagine being a non-entity. You know what a non-entity is? It's a completely spiritual person. A non-entity. No identity whatsoever of my own, of myself. I'm nothing. The Creator does the work. So I could simply become an instrument so that my Creator is writing through me, speaking through me, and shining through my eyes. The first thing that returns to a lot of us is the light in the eyes. If you're sponsoring guys, you can, right? Am I right? You see it. You see the light come back on in their eyes. And you know the Spirit is being activated by this process. And so all we're suggesting here is, why stop that activation at any level? Why not shoot for the moon? And so we come in, and as we look at this, we're now trying to have the spiritual side contacted, try to return to becoming just an observer, and the steps lead right into that. They're all designed to take and dismantle the ego story that we assembled. And that's why it's called a story. I heard a speaker one time get up and said, my story is divided into two parts. What happened during the years that I drank and what I thought happened during the years that I drank. And everybody laughed and said, that's really clever, but that can be said about any aspect of our lives. My childhood was divided into two parts: what happened when I was a child and what I thought happened when I was a child. You see what, in other words, I am adding the editorializing to all the events that happened to me. And I said this last time we were here, if I were to listen to talks that I gave in my 10th year and compare it to the talks I give now, I have a much better childhood now. How could you have a better childhood 40 years later? I see it spiritually. I see it. It was revealed to me. You understand what I'm saying? It is, I put the spin on it, that it was awful and all these things. And that's what egos do. So we inventory. So when we look at this, an inventory really is trying to find the parts of the story that have to go. You know what I mean? And we call them character defects, blockages of the channel to allow this spirit to grow in us. It's already there. St. Francis talks about make me a channel. So if we look at this, all we're trying to do is open a channel so that what's already inside of us can come out. That was the pain that we experienced. I never diagnosed it that way. The pain I was experiencing was I was living in a manner that I did not want to live and couldn't do anything about it. I was unable to live up to the values that I wanted to have. I didn't realize that you need to kick in the spirituality in order to overcome the instinctual drives. I didn't know that you couldn't do it on your own. So we were all fighting an impossible battle, which is to be moral without a higher power. I'm going to get rid of self by myself. Now figure that one out. Self-centeredness is the root of my problems. I'm going to do something about that. I'm going to go over there and get unself-centered. Now, how are you going to do that? All by myself. I'm going to become unself. I mean, if you think about it long enough, you realize what a game we were playing. Yes, I'm going to become unselfish. How? The only reference point that we have is ourself as the center from which we look at everything. And if we look at everything from inside here as the center, everything's screwed up, just like the solar system was when they looked at it from Earth as the center. Everything was messed up. And they no, that shouldn't be that way. And then when they went through the terrible ego deflation of allowing the sun to be the center, everybody, oh, look at this, because the sun really was the center. And when we are willing to turn it over to our higher power and allow our Creator to be the center, everything comes into focus. It all looks different because we were willing to do that. And most egos are not willing to even begin to do that, and that's why it's so lucky we have a fatal illness that holds our elbow up behind. Are you sure you don't want to try? And okay, all right, I'll give that up too. And it's a very painful process of allowing ourselves to be wrong. So you see what I'm saying? I'm just going through the steps with a different starting point and ending point. And so the inventory and then sharing with another human being, and we learn the tremendous value of never trying to assess anything on our own. If there's any lesson I've gotten in AA, is to never trust my own judgment on anything. I have a group of friends and I run stuff by them on a regular basis. Hey, this happened. Can you give me your take on it? You know, and just call up somebody. And then I go, 1, 2, 3. And then they go, the way I see it, the other guy is all wrong. He's absolutely wrong. Forgive him. Or, you're the one that's screwed up. Go make an amend. And bing, bing, fixed. Can't do that by yourself, because I'll see it in my favor almost every time. I'm very good at that. And so in those early steps, you can see that there's tremendous groundswell of digging up and plowing the earth inside of us so that something new can grow there. We're getting rid of ideas at a rather rapid rate, because once you start out that I'm not the center, and once you start out that I am an alcoholic, and when I came here I wasn't. A lot of people became alcoholics after they got here. You remember that process? That, well, I have a drinking problem, but I'm not really an alcoholic. And then they suddenly realized, oh my God, not only am I an alcoholic, I've been one for 20 years. All happened after we get here. What is that? Transformation. Do you see what we're talking about is profound transformations. I'm willing to give up fundamental ideas that I hammered in place. And as they come loose, we can feel that freedom, like just dropping stuff outside. It is symbolic of letting go. And what we're letting go is our story. That's what is being shattered so that the truth can be revealed. There's no such thing as the truth. It is an experience that gets revealed to each one of us. So nobody could ever get up and say, okay, here's the truth about this or that. And as it is, you've all had it happen. You've just had these little experiences in AA where suddenly you just, might have been when somebody was speaking, and you just went, geez, I never thought of looking at it that way. Well, God, I'm so glad I was here just to hear that one sentence. Or somebody at a discussion meeting. Well, egos don't normally listen to hear about life from someone else. We're waiting for them to stop talking so that we can fill in the straight scoop. That's what listening was. You just watch the mouth. When it stopped, you talk. You didn't actually take in what they were saying when you're much more intelligent than they are, so why would you want to listen to their advice? So my point is, as we go through the steps, we are dismantling almost our entire life story, one piece at a time. And we start questioning and questioning. That's why I love Chuck C's uncover, discover, discard for the rest of our lives. What else am I wrong about? Until that becomes fun. You know what I'm talking about? It's wow, what else could be wrong in here? Whereas in the beginning, nothing's wrong in here. You remember that? What do you mean wrong? And we just defended this thing that we had built to the death. And now we're going to try and kill it. I remember Hal Marley. Does anybody know Hal? Yeah. He loved to tell the story about the new guy was at a discussion meeting, and the topic was killing the ego. And people are going around there, yeah, you got to get rid of that ego. You got to kill the ego. Somebody came in late and sat next to the new guy, and they said, what's the topic? The new guy said, suicide. Because to him, that's what it felt like. Man, you kill the ego, there's nothing. When you're all ego, and you start talking about, so we have to realize, as we start getting rid of these ideas, there is something, there's another dimension to me. It's not a theory. Remember that? The spiritual life is not a theory. There really is a spiritual entity in me, and meditation and many different things reveal that for us. And so does the process of the steps. So as we finally go through and take a fifth step and then go into the hardest part of the program, where we're going to actually try and reduce the ego to zero. When you look at the sixth step, it is saying we're entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. You could rephrase all the ego. In other words, totally remove me from any role in my life at all. And I would simply carry out the spiritual direction that is presented to me every day. Now that's perfection. And some people can reach it, most of us can't. But Bill suggests right in there, and I did give you all a list of quotations from the 12 and 12 in the big book. It's in your handout. And I picked the ones that I thought really applied to what we're trying to accomplish on this weekend. And now I forgot the point I was making. Oh, in that sixth step, he said we have to raise our eyes towards perfection. And he makes that point very clear, because turning over 100% would in fact be the equivalent of perfection. Nothing that I would achieve, so of course you can't achieve perfection, but you could allow it to happen. There's two very distinct things. One is the human frailty could never come close to that. But if the human ego could be moved out of the way, that's all that would be left. You see what I'm saying? It's a whole different way of seeing what perfection really means. It's not achievable, but it could be surrendered to. It's already there. The spiritual help is all perfect help.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom?
And so these thoughts now, that's a different way of looking at steps 6 and 7. I'm going to get rid of my character defects. I am going to destroy the ego. I am going to reduce my role in my own life. So this becomes a very personal thing. And that's what Bill says in the 11th step. It's a personal adventure. It's a we program. We program, but when we come to prayer and meditation, that's by ourselves. That is seeking. And of course, that is why we have our slogan on the here and t-shirts, seek and you will find. Seeking is an individual decision of how hard we are willing to seek this spiritual entity. And so, as we get to the end, where we make the amends and then start this prayer and meditation, we get to the finale of our program. Now, everybody knows what the finale is that occurs in the 12th step. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message and practice these principles. So if I never would have answered it this way, but today I answer this question in the following way. Well, what is the message of the AA program? Now, I used to say, well, it's how to get sober, how to return to society, how to be happy, how to be with your family. I had a lot of things that I considered the message of the AA program, and I now realize that's not what the step says. It's how to have a spiritual awakening. That's what that says. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message. What message? How to have a spiritual awakening. So if someone came here and didn't have a spiritual awakening, they missed it. In my judgment, we missed the whole remarkable transformation that is available here. And the reason I mention that is that and I've mentioned this in other talks, if you go back about 40 to 50 years ago, in a lot of mid-sized cities, and in some even the larger cities, there was only one meeting a week. Now you think back, now how are you going to stay sober on one meeting a week? People were doing it, but how'd they do it? Well, you really look forward to the meeting. That was one thing you did. You really, boy, Thursday's coming up. Boy, I can hardly wait. It's Monday and Thursday, there'll be the meeting. The other thing you might do is you get together with somebody else who goes to that meeting halfway through the week and have coffee. So now you cut the week in half. But mostly you prayed like hell. That's how you did it. You just prayed like hell. And today in AA, there's nowhere that's like that, not in this country. Even the other countries are starting to really flesh out the number of meetings. So now we find if somebody comes into AA now, there's 6 a.m. meetings, 8 o'clock meetings, 12 o'clock meetings, 4 o'clock meetings, midnight meetings. There's intergroups, there's conferences, there's gay groups, men's groups, women's groups. There's pamphlets on everything there is. There is conventions, there's dances, there's CDs, there's tapes, my God, we got a support system now that is so big you don't have to hardly pray at all. So you could have, just for discussion purposes, pretty good sobriety on the support system. You follow what I'm talking about? Pretty good sobriety. Sober, hanging in, that type of energy. And Bill quoted Abraham Lincoln on that very subject when he said, "The good is the biggest enemy of the best that there is." Because good takes away the necessity to improve. And that has to be done on our own. That is where personal seeking comes in. And so I was going to have Amy pass out Chuck C's. Would you give me one to start with, Amy? I'm just quoting from Chuck C. out of New Pair of Glasses. This retreat actually was inspired by Chuck's retreat. Oh, thanks. And so I just quoted the main part, and I want you all to take this with you, because this is where we are starting this weekend. And he pulls no punches, as you will see. There's only one problem in this life. How about that? Only one problem. One problem that includes all problems. And one answer that includes all answers. I am totally convinced that the only roadblock between me and you, between me and my God, is the human ego. The only roadblock there is. And I further believe that the best definition you'll ever hear of the human ego is the feeling of conscious separation from what? From everything. Conscious separation from God, from each other, and eventually from ourselves. And then I just put a few quotes from the big book. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it to the gates of insanity or death. All right, the illusion is just a small part that the ego put together. And because of that illusion, people will pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. That's how powerful the story is. And the delusion we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed. I mean, these are pretty powerful words. Crushed, smashed. We were fooling ourselves, for deep down inside of every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Is he not the victim of the delusion he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? So we're back to, and the rest of the weekend is going to be to try and do something about the feeling of conscious separation from. What this means, and then we can wrap it up with this. It's a very hard thing to talk about, conscious separation. I mean, yes, I understand it. It means that I feel I exist as a separate person from you. And you. And you. I am completely separate from you. Does everybody in this room sort of agree that that's the perspective that you all have? Yeah, I exist separate from everybody in this room and everybody else on planet Earth. All right, so then we go to the big book, and we're confronted with God is everything or he's nothing. He either is or he isn't. All right, God is everything. God is everything. So I remember when I said, well, I'm going to go with that. Remember it said after that, what was our choice to be? Now, the choice that we make is going to greatly influence the direction of our lives. If I choose that God is everything, it's going to be quite different than if I decide he isn't. Or I could stay undecided and just hang around with everything staying good. But for discussion purposes, just to show you how powerful the ego is, let's suppose that we decide God is everything. And now we're going to take it in. We're going to internalize it. So that means that I am part of God, and you're part of God, and God is this microphone, God is this room, God is everything there is. There is nothing anywhere in the universe that isn't God. And as I take that inside, it doesn't fit. I don't know about you all, but as I sit back and really think about it, I go, I could see where he is everything, and I don't know how this is possible, but I seem to exist in addition to everything. Does anybody else understand what I'm talking about? As I get really honest and take all of that in, I see that there is everything. And it's all God, and there it all is. But there's also me. Well, how the hell is that possible? How could you exist in addition to everything? Does anybody relate to what I'm saying? It's like, here it is, there it is, and there's also me. And for everybody here, and there's also me, and there's also me, and there's also me. Well, what are we talking about? How could you exist in addition to everything? You want to know how? You make up a story that you exist in addition to everything. And you live there. And it's scary. It's really scary to live in that story, because there's no such place. There's no such place. It's just me. And so that's the world that the ego created. And we wonder why it's so frightening to exist there. And the whole thing we put together. What's in that world? See, your world is different than mine. If I could get inside of your world, you have, I don't know what it is. Ice cream trucks frighten you. And you go, really? What kind of a world is that? Somebody else's, something else does. I mean, there's just this whole thing. And it was created because of this separation. We started early on, and it is encouraged, it is almost mandated by society, which also exists in addition to everything. You can see. And so we are going to put up, by way of example, some holograms. And we're going to put them on the wall after this lecture. And they'll be here for the whole weekend. And they're there as a training aid. They're not that hard to stand in front of and stare until you see it entirely different. But I'm going to suggest to you that if we were looking for a definition of insanity from a spiritual perspective, we're going to be restored to sanity. When you go up to the hologram, insanity is what you see before it's revealed to you. And sanity is what happens when the truth is revealed. Now that's revolutionary. That means everything that we think as we're walking around is wacko, because we made it all up. And so when the program talks about more will be revealed, this is exactly what it's doing. It is just allowing you to see other people as fellow parts of God, right? And no one is separate from anything. That we're merely extensions of the Creator. And we're all simply parts of our Creator being manifested in different forms. And that makes us all quite connected on a different level. You remember how close you felt to the people in AA compared to everybody else? I did. I felt like there's a connection here that I only felt in the Marine Corps. That was the only other place I felt that bonding. Wouldn't it be nice if we felt that way about everyone? Everywhere we went, we just felt like, God, I just feel so connected to everyone. That would make a rather remarkably comfortable world to live in. Well, to me, that's what a goal would be. When Chuck writes about awakening, having had a spiritual awakening, the point of seeking, in my judgment, is to awaken as far as is possible. And that's an individual thing that I think is accomplished by seeking. So the more I read about it, I go, well, why can't I fully awaken? I never even gave it a thought. Why would I even entertain that? I'm not qualified to do that. That's only for those guys. And I'm realizing that everyone in this room has that option. It's just as available as it is to anybody else. But I never thought of seeking it. I was content with pretty good sobriety. You follow what I'm saying? This was great. The years are going by. I'm seeing people. It's fun. Yeah. But I always knew there was something more. I always knew, and I don't know if you have that inside of you, but I think it's there inside of everybody. And maybe between some of these lectures, between your taking this perspective and chatting amongst yourselves, maybe from the literature in the back, you will get a hold of something that you decide to seek. And who knows where it'll take you. And that's why we put this thing together, was to have some fun, to expand our horizons maybe a little bit, and just to enjoy each other. We're at the end of the time. I certainly appreciate everybody's attention.
He is probably the smartest man in AA. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.